My turn to tell. When it came for me to be my turn to share what I'm thankful for, I did break down in tears because, first of all, I was thankful that Ukraine is still standing. We as a people are still strong and we are still here. We exist as a nation. We have our language, we have our flag, we have our country, we have each other. And I was thankful to God and the ZSU. And this Thanksgiving was different in that way. And then Washington Post wrote an article how the whole world needs to be thankful to Ukraine because we are kind of saving the world's democracy. So Ukrainians, you are loved, we are loved, and the world is thankful for your work. I'm thankful to you as teachers that you continue to shine and bring light and hope to your students through knowledge. So it's an honor. It's an honor to be here. Today, we are gonna get into a very interesting part of our content. And to make that,
can we thank you right now while you are thanking us? Because you are also bringing light to our homes, and it's not only electricity, but yeah, your smile also brings light. And just a couple of words from our president.
One second. I'm back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'd like to thank, first of all, the chance to be here. As I got my internet connection 12 minutes before the meeting. So this is really a sign. And I would like to thank Ruslana and Joy and Marina's thanks on behalf of all people who are participating our today's meeting, that we have Ruslana in these dark times. And it is not, of course, by chance. We know that where there is a will, there is a way. And now we have found this way, and we are to thank for the opportunity to have lights physically in our houses, and to get lights in developing professionally, having these opportunities for meeting each other, at least online, yeah, and sharing this professional atmosphere, the environment, the teamwork we are having every night. We gather together to listen to the lectures of Ruslana. Thank you, Ruslana. We are really thankful to all people who help us, and you as a special guest of us today. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure and honor. I am just indeed honored to be part of this community. I mean every word. With us today, I have my dear friend, Kelly. And Kelly, say hi, unmute yourself. Kelly is she loves Ukraine and Ukrainians. And she has supported me. She has supported me through these months of war in a big way, emotionally and professionally. So Kelly, welcome to our group.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I pray for you all every day. The world stands with you. And I have been lucky because Ruslana has also been apprenticing me into systemic functional linguistics. So I've been learning about this now for maybe 4 years. So, and I'm bringing it to my teachers. So I said to Ruslana, I would love to help with the TESOL group and share what I do with my students. So thank you so much for having me here today. And I can't wait until the war is over. I keep telling Ruslana because I'm going to be there as soon as I can, doing whatever, cooking, helping out in schools, meeting you all. Cooking, hoping to learn to cook from you. I don't cook well.
We'll cook for you, only come. You won't need to cook. We're so hospitable.
I just want to learn.
We share our love through cooking. So just come and you'll have lots of food.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, let's start with our content. And I'm going to share my screen. And 1 second. Okay. So, no, that's not where I want to start. Hang on. I want to start at the beginning, not in the middle. Okay, wonderful. So today we are talking about verbs. And in systemic functional linguistics, verbs are a whole different way of representing the world and the human experiences. So even though we as grammar people, we love our verbs and we love conjugating them and we like talking about regular and irregular and modal verbs and linking and auxiliary, systemic functional linguistics is positioning verbs in a different way, in a functional way. And so I'm very excited to bring that perspective to you, because when I was learning about verbs from systemic functional linguistics perspective, it kind of challenged my preset notions of what I brought in from structural grammar. And so if you feel that dissonance today, it's okay, welcome it, and kind of go into that space of dissonance if that happens for you, because it's kind of an exciting place. That's where the new learning happens. So just as a reminder that we are continuing this is a theory of language that we're using, which defines language as a meaning-making system of choices in context. System means language is not random, and that we make choices is another big idea. We don't just produce structures, but we make choices based on the context in which we communicate. And it's not an inventory of structures. However, structures are important to SFL, but what's more important is how structures map onto meanings and how structures construe different meanings. So we're still in the field of the theory, the field, tenor, and mode, the three variables of the language system, and we're still talking about the field. Last month we talked about participants realized through noun groups, and we were expanding the noun groups through by talking about storks. If you have any exciting things that your students did with that work, I would love to see it or to hear about it. If you just want to share something really exciting right now, feel free to unmute yourself or drop in the chat of how this work is making an impact in your teaching.
May I? I immediately introduced this approach, and I have here one of my colleagues. Her name is Anna Larivon, and she got really excited. She wasn't present last time, but she's here now because she said, wow, that's how I understand my students need to talk to express themselves. And we did, now we are doing these groups like with all topics and starting even with the students of, let's say, the 5th grade but I'm talking about English here. So they already can have this expanding noun groups, and we are amazed how it works. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. So while we are talking about processes today, so I'm getting ahead a little bit of myself here. In SFL, verbs are called processes, and I'll explain in a second why. We're also going to be talking a little bit about circumstances. Circumstances are the additional information that you will find in a clause or sentence that answers questions where, when, how, why. So you will often see adverbials of manner, place, and time, realized through prepositional phrases, but also other resources, not just prepositional phrases, adverbs as well, and other ways. So here is the way we answer the way we find out which part is a noun group, a participant realized as a noun group, which part is a process, and which part is a circumstance, is through these set of questions. So first, who or what, it will answer the question, who are the participants? Weather, climate, they can be non-human participants. Just a very quick review. They can be abstract or concrete. They can be general or specific. They can be humans or non-humans. Kombucha is delicious. Kombucha is a participant. It's a rybny kvass. And processes are actually answer the question, what's happening? What are the participants doing or thinking or feeling or saying? And the circumstances is when, where, how, and why. And when in systemic functional linguistics, we talk about the different verbs, they're not just grammatical structures. They express different parts of the human experience. So that's where it's such a humanizing linguistics, because structures are connected to what parts of our experience they represent or express. So verbs represent our physical movement, our sayings and interactions, our senses, what we think, feel, or perceive, how we create links between different bits of information, relating and existential verbs. In SFL, verb is the center of the clause and carries the most meaning of all the clause elements. For example, if I say a verb, traveling is life-changing, or traveling can be life-changing, or traveling has to be life-changing experience, the verb really is where the most carries the most meaning of all the clause elements. And my good mentor, an Australian linguist, Sally Humphrey, says that verb is the engine of the sentence. I really, really like that. Gives me something to think about. So I know how much I get a sense that Ukrainian educators love to know theory. And so this is and in Ukrainian, in English, we have this word that we use a lot. It's a geek. And geek is a word that means that you really get in something deeply. You like to geek out. It becomes a verb then. So it's a funny word. It has a funny connotation. But Kelly and we like to geek out about SFL. So this slide is for the geeks in you. Those people who just love to go deep. So these verbs or processes, as I said earlier, represent human experience in terms of these 6 different process types, and they are in color. I'm going to start with the red and then go around it's actually going counterclockwise. We have the 3 worlds in our life, sort of the world of abstract relations, the physical world, the red, and the world of consciousness, the blue. And then within each, verbs represent our physical physical experiences, everything that happens in the physical world. The rain falls, I cook food, I drink coffee with my friends. All these physical material things is part of the what verbs represent, behavioral material. And also not just behavioral material, not just the outside world, but also our inner worlds. Our inner worlds are represented through mental and verbal processes. And they're here in the blue, seeing, feeling, thinking. So all of a sudden, your notion of verb as an action word, this wheel, it just kind of blows it up. There is so much more than verb being an action. Yes, it's a small part of our experience, but also the inner worlds that we inhabit through thinking, feeling, and seeing, and then existential or relational. So these are, they express how ideas are related to each other. Usually it's through is or are or have or belong to. So it's definitely, this wheel is something that really positions verbs in light of the human experiences that represent. And in some cases they overlap, and you can see those in the colors, the existential and relational overlap, the verbal and mental overlap, the behavioral, because the feelings are expressed through behavior, so those overlap, and the material. We'll get into examples in a minute. And I found that this visual helped me position that wheel in a different way. So usually we talk about, okay, we have verbs like auxiliary verbs. They're like is, are, you know, and then the modals, and could or would or should. And then from systemic functional linguistics, we also have a group of lexical verbs which are from that wheel: material, behavioral, mental, verbal, what we say, relational, and existential. And relational and existential are kind of related, almost two sides of the same coin. So here is a different way of representing these different verbs. So material are your physical actions. You know, somebody's playing football there, oops, and a girl is jumping. So play, throw, catch, jump, run, sweat, all of that is material. And mental is thinking, feeling, perceiving. Verbal groups are everything that we do when we talk. Ask, deny, persuade, claim, say, imply, question, suggest, whisper, yell. All of those are verbal groups, verbal processes realized through those verbs. And the relational and existential are these ones. So being or become, turn into, remain, seem, appear. Because it's like, where do these verbs go? They're not, there's no action per se. It's like have, include, comprise, possess, belong. You know, so in systemic functional linguistics, they're termed as relational. So in terms of examples, this will sound like a lot of repetition, but this is just a different modes of representing the same wheel of the grammar of experience from the experiential metafunction of systemic functional linguistics. Here are material verbs, are the doing words. They answer the question, what did Callie do? Callie joined us on Zoom. They are outside activities which happen in the material world: run, read, cook, bake. Mental are processes that represent the processes of our internal world and include perception, emotion, and desire. they're inside activities. I like that distinction. I got it from this guy in the source on the bottom. Think, consider, calculate, get scared. Verbal processes are sort of the easy ones. Speak, reply, yell, claim, argue, conclude. They're just verbs for communicating. Then the other three from the wheel of the 6 different processes, the relational link 2 pieces of information. Let's see, kangaroos are marsupials. R connects 2 pieces of information together, classifies the marsupials. Existential, it's basically a type of a relational process. There's no action or relationship being described. It's simply a state. I am Ukrainian, and I am proud to be Ukrainian. So am is existential verb, and they introduced the existence of a new participant. Once upon a time, there was. Behavioral, so it's funny because I never really considered these until I started digging into this content. They are halfway between material and mental processes, and they have features of both. And they include involuntary processes like cough or sneeze, achoo, and volitional processes, watch, stare, listen. And behavioral processes always take a human doer. Okay, this was for the geeks of us. This is a lot of theory. So we are going to work with a little bit simplified system of verbs. The 6 types are really nuanced way of looking at verbs. We're going to put behavioral and material verbs together into the action doing verbs, like has been sleeping, drove, went, hugged, laid down. Relating are being and having. Here's a whole bunch of them. Saying and sensing and feeling. So we're gonna, when we work today with Kelly, with the folk tale Circo, we're gonna just look at these 4 types where behavioral and physical are grouped together. Ta-da! So I want you to take a look at this text. This actually is from a local newspaper where I live. And I want to ask you a question to now apply the knowledge of verbs by reading this text. What are most common verbs or processes in this text, and why? The why question gets you to the genre. Because remember from our first session, we talked about that genre is a context of culture and also influences language choices. In this case, this is a newspaper report about deluge. Deluge is an English word for very heavy flood. So weather reporters announced that almost 15 inches, that's almost 40 centimeters, I think, of rain fell in, so 15 inches, almost 15 inches of rain is a participant, fell in one day in Cross Plains and surrounding towns, Mazomanie and Black Earth. Police reported flooded streets, stalled cars, a stalled fire engine, stalled means застрягли, engine from Verona, and dozens of people calling for rescue. Police warned drivers not to drive through flooded streets. The fire department dispatched police officers and volunteers to rescue stranded citizens. The village leadership encouraged residents to report any flood damage to FEMA. So the most common processes in this text are saying or reporting, because the genre is news story and it's a report with words like announced, reported, warned, and encouraged. And what's interesting is that there are other verbs in this story for sure. They are material processes, dispatched, flooded, fell, and those are also important. So you can draw students' attention to whatever verbs they're studying but in this case, the reporting verbs were so prevalent because the genre is a newspaper report. So that's how genres and structures are always connected. The second example is about a recipe, because someone really talked about, at our last session, there was a lot of interest to talk about recipes. Now, when you consider what you just heard about different kinds of processes, look at the recipe and tell me what kind of processes of verbs are realized as verbs are in this text. They're all the same. I'm going to look at the chat. Yes, they're all action. They're all action. They're all action, physical, material verbs doing the physical doings. By the way, in English, I learned this verb to fold in something. In a recipe, fold in something is a very specific verb, and it's typically used just in recipes. And it's different than just add. Kelly, can you give us the nuance of what fold exactly means in a recipe?
Oh, it's for example, if you have a batter and then you want to add something to it, but you have to kind of mix, but big mixes, not fast, but slow. You want to fold it in. It's a slow addition to a kind of liquid batter. Maybe if you add cheese to a batter, you don't want it to mix too much, but you just want to add it and fold it in. It's a funny cooking word.
Oh, it's very important. It surprised me and it confused me. I'm like, what are we folding here? Are we folding paper? Are we folding clothes? No, we're not folding clothes and paper. It's actually just kind of add but slow. So I don't think we have a nuanced verb like that in Ukrainian. You guys tell me if you think we do. Last time we talked about julienne, slice, and dice as
Повільно додавати.
Say it again.
Повільно додавати.
Yes.
Або поступово.
Поступово. So you would have to have an adverb to add the meaning to the verb to have the same meaning as expressed in one word in English. Yeah. Повільно додавати, поступово. Gradually. Yeah, thank you. So all of these are, and it's interesting because the genre is a recipe. So you're not going to have saying verbs or feeling verbs. For obvious reason, you only have material doing actions. So that's why genre is always part of the conversation whenever I talk. Now, here is an interesting, this genre is an information report. I highlighted these in green. Yeah, these are, I got one response in the chat. These are relating verbs. Gorillas are, humans also belong, are not related, have, are, and are called. If I said, Kelly calls me on the phone, call becomes a material verb because it's a physical action. In the last sentence, so it's not, it's all about context. In the last sentence, it's a relating verbs because it says what they're called versus how they're called on the phone. Like if I were to pick up my phone and call a gorilla on the phone, people would be concerned about my mental health, but it would be a different verb. It would be a physical material verb. So now because we're so interested in making this theory be applicable to students, I made a list of different kinds of verbs to show you how they can be used in the context of reading or writing when you have lessons with your students. So, for example, I can use relating verbs to create classifications of animals. So from functional perspective, there is two levels of being functional. One is what kind of structures we need to create what kind of meanings. Another one is why do we need the structures for what function? So to create classification of animals, that's why we need relating verbs. In that way, you are always thinking of the function. What are we doing with the verbs? And why do our students need relating verbs? Yes, for grammar accuracy, but also to do more with it, to classify animals. Action verbs to describe animal behavior. So in this case, because we're writing, for example, we're writing information reports. So when you write information reports with students, then they're going to need relating verbs to classify the animal and action verbs to describe their behavior. Hibernate, prey, hunt, or reproduce, or eat, or live, or walk. Easier verbs. So cats walk on all fours. They jump on top of the bookshelf. So all of those action verbs describe animal behavior. Feeling verbs to tell how characters feel. He felt loved in a personal recount or narrative. Saying verbs to tell what characters say to other characters. And we're going to read the story today. Sirko said and Wolf asked. And then our classic modal verb groups to call to action. We should stop using so much plastic, or create a sense of urgency. We must act now. So here I even positioned our favorite modal verbs, which we love, with a function. Why do we need modal verbs? There is other reasons, but these two I have examples. So this is something to try in your classroom and position grammar in the service of learning something fun that the kids like. Okay. So these slides actually, I kind of want to almost go quickly because this will just be nuanced of each verb in the genre. So, for example, action verbs exist in most texts, but particularly in texts such as procedures, recounts, explanations, and narratives. So it's we're gonna look at a narrative today. There will be lots of action verbs in there. Action verbs in literary text not just do actions, but they also create feelings. And this is really interesting because structurally it's an action verb, but if you look at the meaning in text, it actually creates a feeling. So if I say we twirl and sway, so Jackie, Joyce, Liz, Rosemary, and I, we grab the hands of our mamas, we twirl and sway them. It's like a dance, tromping through the puddles, romping and reeling in the moisty green air. This is from a children's book, Come On, Rain. And so these verbs here, they are almost like dancing verbs. And even though they are dancing verbs, they create feelings. So this is just another way to look at action verbs in narratives. Action verbs in literary text paint characters in positive or negative light. She walked along the street is pretty neutral, meaning she dragged her feet, negative, and she skipped down the street, just skipped. That's positive. Relating verbs express meanings about relating ideas. They are important for building definitions, writing descriptions, classifying and evaluating phenomena. And here are some examples from math, science, geography, and like in general. Math symbolizes, represents, equals. Science is composed of, is comprised of, is classified as. A magnet is an object that exhibits a strong magnetic field. X symbolizes 2. X minus 1 equals Y. Y equals 1. So all of those are relating verbs. And from geography, the driftless area where I live is located in southwest Wisconsin. And some more examples: is found, is located, in situated, is situated, and then other general ones. Saying verbs are fun in stories and narratives. You got to see them mostly in those two genres. To get to know characters by the way how they speak and interact with others. In news stories, to quote and report information, like I shared the news story before. And in arguments where textual evidence is cited. Claim, contradict, contribute, refute, add, disagree. All of those are saying verbs in narratives or reporting verbs. And look at these 3 verbs here. This is from Harry Potter. So saying verbs reveal characters, and this is where Kelly's gonna come in a minute. And whined, ordered, and moaned. So when you look at the verb, you can actually see what kind of character the person is. So make it move. He whined at his father. And that just shows you that he is kind of what kind of person when he's whining. He's not respecting his father. Make it move. Do it again, Dudley ordered. And it shows you how the person is behaving through just a saying verb, or what kind of person he is. And moaned, this is boring, Dudley moaned. Instead of say, Dudley said, Dudley moaned means just like he's complaining. It's boring. He shuffled away. And even not walked away, but shuffled away. That's another nuance. Sensing, think, feel, desire, perceive. They are used in relation to humans or non-humans. They're used in narratives and literary recounts, mainly because storytellers need to describe what their characters are feeling and thinking. And here is a few examples of sensing verbs. Thinking, feeling, wanting, and perceiving. Perceiving is kind of the senses we have. I sense, touch, sense, think, hear, smell. And this is an example of what verbs do in narratives, because our focus today will be on narratives. And doing verbs, here's an example. The owner went to harvest the crops in the field. That's from your story. Sensing example. Everybody loved Sirko. The wolf felt sorry for Sirko. And being relating, Sirko was hungry. Just an example of different verbs in one story. And saying is, Sirko answered, I grew old and nobody needs me anymore. More examples of language goals, and I'm going to, with this, hand it over to Kelly.
Thank you. Will you continue to move the PowerPoint?
Yes, I'll be happy
Oh.
to.
Okay, so in working with students and unpacking the language of narrative stories so that then we can apprentice them kind of step by step through the teaching and learning cycle to write their own narratives. We kind of work as language detectives to see how saying verbs can show relationships through relationships between characters through interactions. And it also can just show character traits like we just saw, if someone moans or if someone orders, commands. It tells a lot about their character by the kind of saying verbs used to describe how they're saying something. I can use thinking and feeling verbs to develop my characters, and also action verbs can tell what my characters do, which also shows their behaviors. So when I work with teachers on this, and then in turn, when they work with their students, at first there's often dissonance because in English, when most of us learned English at school in our English language arts classes, we were taught that adjectives, that's their job, that they tell us about characters. So often there's a lot of dissonance and kind of like, I don't believe this could be real. So if you're feeling that now, it's normal because it's not what a lot of us are taught the job of verbs is to actually, tell us character traits or show us character traits. So next slide. So we're going to read Sirko. I'm trying to pronounce it correctly. I thought we should use a story that maybe you're familiar with and that you can also use with your students. So we're going to be language detectives together, and we're going to see how verbs can show us character traits.
And the idea behind using a bilingual story, right, just like I said in the email, and a story that students know in Ukrainian, is so that English, because they know the development of the story and what happened when and where and how and who are the characters, if you know that in your first language, learning it in English may be easier and more motivating to learn the English language of the familiar story. That's the idea.
So we're going to focus on how processes, verbs, and circumstances reveal characters. So circumstances, again, Ruslana told us this earlier, are expressed through adverbials that answer when, where, how, with whom, or for how long. So Sirko had faithfully served his owner his whole life. So if we look at that alone, had faithfully served, what does that tell us about Sirko? What kind of dog is he? What are some adjectives that we could use that capture the idea of he faithfully served? A good dog, absolutely. Loyal, right? He's a loyal dog. He faithfully, yes, a loyal dog. Exactly, his whole life. But when he became old and unworthy, the owner, so now we're focusing on the owner, drove him away. And in English, we know that I can drive my car, but that's not the sense of this drive. He drove him away. He just pushed him out of his house. So what kind of man is the owner if he drives his dog away, who had been faithful and loyal his whole life? Cruel, right? Very cruel. mean, disloyal, we could say. Like, where's his loyalty to his dog who was faithful to him his whole life? Okay, so next slide.
Mhm. 1 second.
So we're going to take a chart and we're going to find some of these verbs and then the circumstances around them. So verbs plus adverbials. And we're going to think, does this show me a behavior, a thought, a feeling, or some speech, those speech words? And you're going to put them in the column that they correspond to. And then you're going to tell us, what does it tell us more about this character? What trait? So translating that verb group with the circumstances into an adjective. So next slide. So for example, again, Circo had faithfully served his owner. So next slide. So I would take the words had faithfully served. So go ahead, you can cut and paste those, Ruslana, the gray box.
Yeah, 1 second, I need to minimize in order to, one
Okay,
second. Here. He had faithfully served.
so
taught.
faithfully served, is that a behavior, a thought, a feeling, or speech? So behavior, okay. Excellent.
Mhm.
So that's what you're going to do. And then here, I'll put in the chat box this sheet. We're going to work in three groups. We'll go into a I was thinking we could go into breakout rooms and you could work in groups to do this, which could be kind of fun. So here's the worksheet. There's a group 1, a group 2, a group 3. It will depend on the number of your breakout room, which group you'll be. So I'm going to put that in the chat
Mhm.
box as well. So you have the story Circo, and then you have the worksheet. So if you're in the first group, group 1, you'll focus on language, the verbs and the circumstances of the old man. So you might do a couple from the beginning of the book and then at the end of the book. And sometimes one of our standards for our students when they're learning English in the United States, our Common Core state standards for English language arts, a lot of times we look at how characters change over the course of a story. And do they change? Are they dynamic or are they static? So this type of language detective work can help us do that. If you're in breakout room 2, you're going to focus on Circo and his verb groups. And then if you're in breakout room number 3, you'll be the wolf. So Ruslana, can you check on the
Yeah.
group 3 on the worksheet?
Yes, and Marina's gonna help us set up
Oh,
here.
the groups. Okay.
This is the story, bilingual story. Here it is. And then the other link above was the the other link. Sorry, I clicked on the Google Doc.
Verbs to show characters on, yeah.
Yes. There they are. So
So
here,
group 1, the old
Yeah.
man. So you'll pull some of those. So when you're in your group, you might decide, oh, I'll look for speech, or I'll look for, or you might choose one together and then discuss together. Oh, I found a verb and some adverbials. What do you think? So you can decide in your group how you would like to do this. How does that sound?
let me see.
And if Marina, if you can make us co-hosts, then we can join other groups too. Thank you.
Okay.
So about 5 minutes, we'll try this or so.
we can